Hi everyone, here are your notes in video form for rates and unit rates. Your learning target is to understand rates involving fractions and use unit rates to solve problems. And your success criteria are I can find unit rates for rates involving fractions, and I can use unit rates to solve rate problems. Your vocabulary that you'll learn in this lesson is rate, unit rate, and equivalent rates. A rate is a ratio of two quantities using different units. A unit rate compares a quantity to 1 unit of another quantity. For example, miles per hour. It's comparing how many miles you travel per hour with your labels or your units being miles and hours. Equivalent rates just have the same unit rate. An example, you pay $350 for every 1/4 ounce of gold. The rate is $350 per 1/4 ounce. The unit rate is $1,400 per ounce. And all that you did is multiply times 4, and then you multiplied your other unit times 4 as well. A nutrition label shows that every 1/4 cup of tuna has 1/2 gram of fat. How many grams of fat are there for every cup of tuna? So for this one, we're going to set up our rate, and our rate is going to be grams per cup. So we have 1/2 of a gram per 1/4 of a cup. That is 1/2 divided by 1/4, and we can multiply by the reciprocal. We can cross simplify, and we get 2 grams per cup. B says how many cups of tuna are there for every gram. So our rate is just going to change to cups per gram, which is now going to change our fraction to 1/4 over 1/2. So 1/4 divided by 1/2, multiplied by the reciprocal, 1/4 times 2 over 1. And now when we cross simplify, we get 1/2 cups per gram. These are a little bit more basic, but we're still asking you to find the unit rate. Please remember that unit rate means per 1. So our rate is $1.32 per 12 ounces. We want a rate per 1 ounce. So we would divide by 12, because 12 divided by 12 equals 1. So we do the same thing to the top, 132 divided by 12. 12 doesn't go into 1, it goes into 13 once. 12 goes into 12 once, and there's no remainder, so we get 0.11, or 11 cents per ounce. Here's another one where we're finding unit rates, and in this scenario, our units are not represented as fractions. So for this one, let's set up our rate as 16 miles per 6 gallons. We know that ultimately we want to have a unit rate, which means per 1 gallon. So we would divide by 6 because 6 divided by 6 is 1. So we do the same to the top. 16 divided by 6. 6 goes into 16 twice. 6 goes into 40 6 times. 6 goes into 40 6 times. So we have our repeating pattern. So we get 2.6 repeating miles per 1 gallon, and that is your unit rate, with unit rate meaning per 1. Now you've seen that we can find unit rate 2 different ways. So we can set it up as gallons per mile, and we could do 1/4 over 3/10. This is 1/4 divided by 3/10, or multiply by the reciprocal and cross simplify. And we get 5/6 gallons per mile. I would say in general, when you have unit rates and you have both of your units being represented with fractions, your best bet is going to be to do complex fractions and then multiply by the reciprocal. So like I just said, when you have 2 fractions, your best bet is going to be create a complex fraction and multiply by the reciprocal, which is what we have here. So you go ahead and try this one. There's 1/4 gram of fat for every 1/3 tablespoon of powdered peanut butter. How many grams of fat are there for every tablespoon of powder? Try it on your own. Push play when you're ready. So make sure you read the question carefully. How many grams of fat for every tablespoon? So we're going to do grams per tablespoon. We have 1/4 gram per 1/3 tablespoon, which is 1/4 divided by 1/3. Now multiply by the reciprocal, and we get 3/4 grams per tablespoon. In example number 2, we're using a unit rate to solve a rate problem. A scientist estimates that a jet of liquid iron in Earth's core travels 9 feet for every half hour. How far does the liquid iron travel in 1 day? So let's first of all set this up as feet per hour, because that's what we know. We have 9 feet per half of an hour. I would say in this situation, we're going to be best off getting a unit rate like this. 1/2 times 2 gets us to 1 hour. So 9 times 2 gets us to 18 feet per hour. The question then states, how far does the liquid iron travel in 1 day? 1 day is 24 hours. So we're going to take 18 feet per hour, and we're going to multiply that by 24. 24 times 18. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 2 is 16, and 3 is 19. 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 2 is 2. We get 432 feet per day. So what if? This is your try it. The scientist later states that the iron actually travels 3 feet every 10 minutes. Does this change your answer from example 2? Explain. Go ahead and solve and explain this one and then push play when you're ready. So we have 3 feet per 10 minute. Let's get that to a unit rate of 1 hour. 10 minutes times 6 is 60 minutes or 1 hour. So let's multiply the top part of our rate, 3 times 6, to get 18. So we get 18 feet per 1 hour. 18 feet per hour was the exact same rate per hour from our previous example. And if we then multiplied by 24, because there's 24 hours in a day, we would once again get the same answer of 432 feet per day. So we would say no, this does not change our answer because these rates are still equivalent. 3 feet per 10 minutes is the same as 9 feet per 1/2 of an hour. In this example, we'll use tools. Find the missing values in the ratio table and then write the unit rate of grams per cup and the unit rate of cups per gram. So the first thing I notice is that I'm going to have to find a factor that I can apply to get from 2/3 to 1/6. But for me, I'm not able to do that in my head. I don't know what number I could multiply by 2/3 to get to 1/6. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get a common denominator, 2/3, and I'm going to multiply by 2/2 to get a new equivalent fraction of 4/6. I do know how I can get from 4/6 to 1/6. I have to divide by 4. Okay, so what that tells me is 2/3 divided by 4 is 1/6. So now I can apply that same factor. I can divide by 4, and I'll be able to get my missing term. So 5/2 divided by 4, which is 4/1. When I'm dividing fractions, instead I'll multiply by the reciprocal, and I get 5/8. So now from here, we have some choices to make. Basically, where do we go next? I'm actually going to go to the top and I'm going to look for numbers that might be compatible there. I'm going to look to jump from 5/8 over to 15/4. Okay, but before I do that, I need to identify that 15/4 has an equivalent fraction of 30/8. So if I said this was 30/8, then I know that my factor I apply will be times 6. So here I'll also multiply by 6. Because 5 times 6 is 30. 1/6 times 6 is 1. Now I can keep going. Things just got a little bit easier for me. 1 times 4 is 4. So on the top, I would multiply by 4. 15/4 times 4 is going to be 60/4. And 4 goes into 60 15 times. And now there's one left. I need to get from 15 back to 1. So wouldn't I divide by 15? So here I would also divide by 15. 4 divided by 15 is the same as 4/15. So it says write the unit rate of grams per cup. So that would be 15/4 grams per cup. Or you could say per 1 cup. And then four 15ths of a cup per 1 gram. For our next example, you hike up a mountain trail at a rate of 1/4 mile every 10 minutes. You hike 5 miles every 2 hours on the way down. How much further do you hike in 3 hours on the way down than 3 hours on the way up? All right, so let's start with 1/4 mile in 1/6 of an hour. Let's go ahead and multiply times 6. 1/6 times 6 is 1. 1/4 times 6 we can cross simplify and we get 3/2 or 1.5. Now we'll multiply times 3 to get to a total of 3 hours. 1.5 times 3 is going to be 4.5. So as we hike up, we will travel 4.5 miles in 3 hours. Now let's work through the same process for hiking down. I want to scale this. So I know I can't multiply necessarily anything times 2 to get to 3, but I can multiply 2 times 3, and that's going to get me to 6. And then I can divide by 2, and that's going to get me to 3. So there's my roadmap. I'm going to multiply by 3, then divide by 2. So on the other side, let's multiply by 3. 5 times 3 is 15. And then 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. The question says, how much further do you hike in 3 hours? So we'll do 7.5 minus 4.5 is 3 miles. For our dig deeper example, it says that a bus travels 0.8 miles east every 45 seconds. So if we make our table, let's say miles and seconds. It travels 0.8 miles in 45 seconds. A second bus travels 0.55 miles in 30 seconds. The buses start at the same location. Use 2 methods to determine how far apart the buses are after 15 minutes. I want to start with bus 2, which is in blue, because I know that if I multiply 30 seconds times 2, I can get to 60 seconds, which is a minute, and I'm going to get 1.1 miles. So now I just need to multiply 60 times 15. 60 times 15 is going to get me to 15 minutes. Okay, in terms of minutes, just to be clear, 15 times 60 is 900 seconds, but it is also 15 minutes. Okay. So then on this side, I'd do times 15. 1.1 times 15 is 16.5. So I've got 16.5 miles for bus 2. And now let's do the same for bus 1. 45 seconds times 2 would be 90 seconds, and 90 seconds is 1.5 minutes. So if I take 1.5 minutes times 2, it's going to put me at 180 seconds, which is 3 minutes. And now if I multiply 3 minutes times 5, 180 times 5 is 900, which I'm at my 15 minutes. So now I again have my blueprint. I'm going to multiply by 2 again, and then multiply by 5. 0.8 times 2 is 1.6. 1.6 times 2 is 3.2. And 3.2 times 5 is 16. So bus 1 goes 16 miles. How far apart will they be? 16.5 minus 16 is 0.5, or half of a mile apart. And now it's your turn to finish up this lesson by trying it. 2 people compete in a 5-mile go-kart race. Person A travels 0.1 or 1/10 of a mile for every 15 seconds. Person B travels 3/8 of a mile every 48 seconds. Who wins the race, and what's the difference in their finishing time? Go ahead and try it. Push play when you're ready. Okay, so person A travels 1/10 of a mile for every 15 seconds. So if we multiply that times 10, we get 1 mile. If we multiply seconds times 10, we get 150. And it says that our go-kart race is a 5-mile go-kart race. So if we multiply 1 times 5, we get to our 5-mile total. And 150 times 5 is 750 seconds. Now let's figure it out for person B. We have miles and we have seconds. They are 3/8 of a mile in 48 seconds. For this one, I actually want to divide by 3 first. And there are multiple ways that you can do these, but I want to divide by 3 because I want to get 1/8. 1/8 of a mile in 16 seconds. And from there, I can now multiply by 8 to get me to 1. 16 times 8 puts me at 128 seconds. And now I can multiply 1 mile times 5, and that puts me at my 5-mile total. and I can do 128 times 5. 128 times 5 is 640 seconds. Who wins the race? Well, it takes person B 640 seconds to go 5 miles. It takes person A 750 seconds. So B wins. And then it says, what is the difference in the finishing time? 750 minus 640 is 110 seconds. So B wins by 110 seconds, or 1 minute and 50 seconds.